What's up everyone, David from dodmedia. I very nearly did not make this tutorial because yesterday I spent most of the day trying to make it and failing. The first time I wasn't quite happy with how the hyperlapse had turned out, and the camera had kind of panned along to the side even though it was meant to be locked off. So then I went out to try and shoot it again, and this time I had another little camera on the side of the handles of the gimbal, and then the gimbal ran out of battery. Somehow halfway through, I wonder if it's because of the cold, because it was sub-zero. Maybe it just drained the batteries a little bit faster than it should have. And so then I got home and I tried to see if I could maybe salvage what I'd shot the first try and try and warp stabilize it or that kind of thing, and it just wasn't working, and I just got really pissed off with it. And so I thought, right, f today, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna try and record a different tutorial. That didn't happen either. I was just, by that point, I was just too But I woke up this morning and thought, it's a new day, there's new potential, let's go out and try it again. And so that's exactly what I did, and I'll explain what I did right after the intro. Okay, so in order to shoot your hyperlapse on a gimbal, you're gonna need a few things. You're gonna need, first of all, a camera with a lens that's wide enough that you can adjust the exposure time. So I was shooting at 1/3 of a second. I was at f6.3 with an ISO of 100. I was at a constant daylight white balance. And of course, with those settings, I was using an ND8 ND filter, which screwed onto the front of the lens. The second thing you'll need is a gimbal. I was using the Julian Crane #1 first version, still hanging in there strong, although I did notice a slight oddity with it. I don't know if it's because of the cold, because of the sub-zero temperatures, but when I was in locked off mode, which is what you should try and do when you're doing your hyperlapse, have it locked off so that it doesn't matter what you do, it's always gonna stay facing that one. I don't know why I'm doing this, I should just get the gimbal, it's over there on the shelf. Anyway, you're in locked off mode and it's facing one direction, and it doesn't matter what you do, it's still going to remain there. But for some reason, locked off modes seem to pan ever so slightly towards the left every step that I took, which means that I got this kind of curved video, which I just had to kind of follow along with the path, and it was handy because the path actually curved. But nonetheless, it was odd that the gimbal was curving when it should have been staying dead straight. So what I did instead was I went with the normal shooting mode, which on my one is set up as it follows your panning movements, but other than that, it stays fixed. So it's not going to tilt up and down, it's not going to yaw or anything like that. It is literally going to stick wherever you're pointing it. And if you turn the actual handle, it will turn ever so slightly, very smoothly with you. I actually found that to be quite beneficial, though it did add a little bit more uncertainty when you're walking, that you can see it kind of does this. It does allow you to just easily go around corners, go around buildings, that kind of thing. And because I was following a path, it really did allow me to go all the way around that path and to kind of pan towards these tennis courts as I was walking past them, and then pan back around. I feel like it actually made it a little bit better, although the overall view is a slightly more shaky view. So maybe that's just because I'm not all that good at the ninja walk that I mentioned in last week's episode. Maybe it's just because I'm kind of a heavy-footed person. I don't know. Maybe you're more stable than I am, and so you could get this a lot smoother than I could. So long story longer, what I did was I hit record on the intervalometer so that it would take a photo every 2 seconds. I took 480 photos, which if you divide by 24, gives you 20 seconds worth of footage at 24 frames per second. Now that's more than enough, but it means that you can speed ramp a few parts if you want to give a certain acceleration past a few obstacles, that kind of thing, or just in the middle of the video or whatever. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility. And I think the result was pretty good. All the photos are on the card, I've dumped them onto my hard drive, so let's open them up in Lightroom and see what we've got. Okay, so my photos are brought into Lightroom, and I've actually deleted 2 of them because they were kind of duds at the very beginning. One had my hand in front of it. It was because I'd reset the time-lapse app after that first experiment where it kind of veered off in locked off mode. So this is me using the gimbal in free mode, whatever it's called. I don't know what the mode is. Follow mode, let's call it. And I've got, 478 photos, and I want the same look applied to all of the photos. So it's pretty simple. I'm going to choose, let's go with the first one. Bam, there, nice motion blur there because I was shooting at 1/3 of a second. So straight away, I'm going to save some of those highlights by going -50. I'm going to bring in some of the shadows by going 50. I'm going to add a bit of clarity by going 25. I'm going to add some vibrance by going 40. And then I'm just going to drop the saturation a tiny bit by going -10. Then I'm going to give some overall contrast so it doesn't just affect the shadows and the highlights. And I'll put that at 15. And then I will drop the exposure by, let's say -0.5. That's good. Maybe a touch more even. Yeah, -0.8. Cool. That's nice. Then I want to add a bit of tone curve to that. So I'm going to go for the vintage photo look. So here's a little trick if you don't know it. Plop a point on your tone curve at the corner, the top right corner of this bottom square in the grid. Because you'll have a grid pretty much always on a tone curve. Plop a point there. And then just drag the absolute bottom black point upwards, and you'll see it kind of ramps the curve instead of making it like a jagged angle like that. And there we go. That looks very nice. Cool. Vintage hipster retro look all the way. Cool. Then hit Control A. It'll select all your photos. Hit sync. Check all. Cool. Synchronize, and you're done. Okay, the next step, there are several ways to do this. In fact, there are a dozen ways to do this, depending on what plugins you have for Lightroom, what software you have, if you're on Final Cut, if you're on Premiere Pro, if you're in After Effects, that kind of thing. The way that I like to do it is I just export all of the photos as JPEGs from Lightroom in their full resolution, and then I drag those in as an image sequence either to Premiere Pro or to After Effects. I tend to use After Effects because it's a little easier for resizing stuff. And Premiere Pro sometimes freaks out a little bit when you've got super high resolution photos that you're trying to squish down, and you know, it's just, yeah, After Effects is better for that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and export all of these photos, and it's going to crunch through and give me a folder with 478 photos. Bam! Okay, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to use After Effects because After Effects is a little bit more advanced than Premiere Pro, and not everyone knows how to use After Effects. Most people watching this are actually using Premiere Pro. So I will navigate to the folder where the photos are by double clicking on this empty space here. There's my folder called LRX, and inside it, there are all the pictures. If you hit that image sequence checkbox, then it will import this as one file, which is kind of like a container for a video file. Even though it's not a video file, it's a collection of photos. Essentially, that's what a video file is. It's a collection of photos. Right, next thing, it is at 25 frames a second. I don't want it to be 25 frames a second. I want it to be 23.976 frames a second, which is what this footage is. So you go right click, whoop, sorry, I was talking while I did that. You go right click, modify, interpret footage, and there you go. Use frame rate from the file, assume this frame rate. We want to assume 23.976 frames per second. There we go. Now this is going to play back at 23.976 frames a second. Whoo! Okay. Now you can see that this photo is way too big because it's a 6K file. It's 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. So we want to reduce that. So let's drop it down to whatever size is going to fit. I think, yeah, 32 is the one. You can tell I've done this before. And there we go. Now if you hit play, it's probably going to struggle to play through with it because, as I said, it's a 6K file that's drawing from loads of different files instead of from one source file. So it's not going to play back very smoothly. However, when you export this, it will look fantastic. And to be honest, that's kind of all there is to it. I wouldn't apply the warp stabilizer to this because warp stabilizer can just be horrendous. Most of the time I find it's pretty horrendous. Especially when you're dealing with low shutter speeds, it's absolutely gross. I mean, it's just going to warp everything. It's not going to stabilize, it's just going to warp the shit out of it. But there you go, if you render that and hit play. And that right there is how you shoot a hyperlapse on a gimbal. Now, why would you do this? I mean, you might be asking yourself, why the hell would you do this? There's two reasons, really. First reason is that it gives you that motion blur as you're walking, because you're constantly walking. It's not like a tripod hyperlapse where you take the photo, move it, drop it, take the photo, move it, drop it, take the photo. With that, everything's going to be sharp except the things that are actually moving, like people or traffic. Whereas with this method, everything on the edges is going to be blurry because you are actually moving the camera forward while it's taking the photo, while it's doing that long exposure. The second reason is that if you look at that building that's in the park there, I didn't walk through it because I wanted to walk around it. However, because you're on a gimbal, you could theoretically walk forwards, and as long as you were stable like a ninja, you could walk forwards until you got through it and actually climb through it while you're still taking your photos and come out the other side. So for example, going through a window, going through, anything you can think of. Anything that you wouldn't be able to take a tripod through as you were doing it step by step because it's just too cumbersome. Anything you wouldn't be able to take a monopod through because you would have to adjust the height and come back down and all that. With the gimbal, you can kind of gauge where it is in terms of height and adjust that accordingly. So that's a pretty interesting possibility if you're able to pull it off smoothly. And that's really all down to your feet and how smooth you are. All right, that's it from me for today. I hope you found this useful. Give it a thumbs up if you liked what you saw. Hit that subscribe button to get more videos from me at dodmedia. Leave a comment in the comments section and I'll get back to you. You might win something from my store. Check out my Instagram at dodmedia as well. I've started using this professionally. Enjoy your gimbal hyperlapsing and I'll see you in the next video.